Imagine a wedding, so perfectly planned that every detail screams luxury. White roses cascading from crystal chandeliers, the soft glow of 1,000 candles, and a couple, radiant in their love, standing at the altar. But what if all that luxury was a meticulously crafted lie? A gilded cage designed to trap an innocent. This isn't just a story about a wedding. It's about the shocking truth hidden beneath the vows. A truth that ripped a family apart and demands justice. Prepare yourself, because we're about to expose the real story behind the smiles, the secrets whispered in the shadows, and the undeniable justice that finally unraveled it all. The wedding of Liam and Clara was the event of the season. Two of the city's most prominent families, the wealthy Vanderbilts and the old Money Ashworths, were finally uniting. From the outside, it was a fairy tale. The venue was a sprawling estate, a historic landmark that had been in the Ashworth family for generations. The guest list was a who's who of high society. Liam, the charming heir to the Vanderbilt tech empire, seemed utterly besotted with Clara, the ethereal, soft-spoken daughter of the Ashworth clan. Their happiness appeared so genuine, so complete. But even in the most perfect picture, a closer look can reveal flaws. During the pre-ceremony photographs, I noticed something odd. A quick, almost imperceptible glance exchanged between Liam's father, Richard Vanderbilt, and Clara's aunt, Eleanor Ashworth. It wasn't a look of shared joy. It was cold, conspiratorial. Later, during the toasts, Richard's speech was less about his son's happiness and more about the merging of two great dynasties. It was a business transaction wrapped in poetic language. Clara, for her part, seemed almost disconnected, her smiles never quite reaching her eyes. She clutched a small antique locket, a nervous habit that seemed out of place amidst the practiced elegance. A gut feeling began to churn within me. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. This perfect day felt like a stage, and everyone was playing a part. The question was, who wrote the script? As the champagne flowed and the orchestra played, the illusion of grandeur was almost convincing. But the truth often lies not in what is seen, but in what is hidden. The architect of this elaborate theater was not the young couple, but the man who had just toasted their union, Richard Vanderbilt. He was the puppet master, and this wedding was his magnum opus. But why would a man of his stature and wealth go to such lengths? The motive, as it turned out, was as old as time itself: greed, fueled by a desperate need to rewrite history. The Vanderbilts, for all their new money and technological success, lacked one thing Richard craved: old-world legitimacy. The Ashworth name carried that weight, that history. But it was more specific than that. The real prize was the Ashworth estate itself, the very ground on which the wedding was being held. Decades ago, Richard's own father had lost a significant portion of his initial fortune in a failed business venture with Clara's grandfather. It was a humiliating defeat that Richard never forgot. He believed, with a burning obsession, that the Ashworths had cheated his family. He wasn't just joining two families. He was reclaiming what he believed was his birthright. The estate wasn't just land and a house. It was a symbol of a past defeat he was determined to reverse. The first hidden gift that unraveled this scheme was discovered by a distant cousin of the Ashworths, a meticulous history buff who was helping to sort through old family records. Tucked away in a dusty ledger was a set of old correspondence between Richard Vanderbilt's father and Clara's grandfather. These letters didn't paint a picture of betrayal, but one of a partnership that ended amicably, with Richard's father acknowledging his own risky decisions. The theft Richard was so obsessed with was a complete fabrication, a story he had told himself and his family for years. Then came the second gift, the antique locket Clara was clutching. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. Inside, it held a miniature folded document. It was a copy of a small, but legally binding, codicil to her grandfather's will. It stated that the estate could never be sold or transferred through marriage as part of a business arrangement. It had to be passed down through direct, willing inheritance. It was her grandfather's way of protecting his legacy from exactly this kind of predatory maneuvering. Clara had been given it by her grandmother before she passed away, with the cryptic instruction to only open it if you ever feel like a bird in a gilded cage. The pieces were starting to connect, revealing a sinister puzzle. The romance between Liam and Clara was no whirlwind love affair.
Oh.
It was a strategic campaign. Richard had identified Clara, the quietest and most impressionable of the Ashworth heirs, as the perfect target. He had engineered their chance meeting at a charity gala he sponsored. He encouraged his son Liam to pursue her, feeding him lines about destiny and tradition. Liam, eager for his father's approval and blinded by Clara's gentle nature, fell right into the plan. He genuinely believed he was in love, but his courtship was guided by his father's unseen hand. Every date, every gift, was a calculated step in a larger game of corporate and social conquest. Richard Vanderbilt was leveraging the esteemed Ashworth legacy to wash away the perceived stain on his own family's history. By marrying his son into their lineage, he wasn't just acquiring property, he was attempting to absorb their respectability, to rewrite his own origin story, he was tarnishing their good name by associating it with his deceitful ambitions. The most tragic part of this entire affair was the number of unsuspecting pawns. Clara was the primary victim, manipulated into a union under false pretenses. But Liam was a pawn too. His genuine affection for Clara twisted into a tool for his father's revenge. Even Clara's own aunt, Eleanor, had been complicit. Embittered by being passed over for control of the family estate, she had allied with Richard, believing his promises of financial reward and a position of power once the merger was complete. She had helped isolate Clara, convincing her that this marriage was her duty to the family. The reckoning was not as public as one might expect. There was no dramatic outburst during the reception. The truth demanded a more solemn stage. 2 days after the wedding, during a meeting to sign the final financial documents that would formally merge the family assets, the trap was sprung. The family historian cousin, armed with the old letters, and Clara, holding the locket and its hidden codicil, confronted Richard Vanderbilt in the Ashworth Library. Liam, Clara's Aunt Eleanor, and the family lawyers were all present. At first, Richard was dismissive, laughing it off as a misunderstanding, but as the letters were read aloud, proving his central narrative of betrayal was a lie, his composure began to crack. Then, Clara, her voice shaking but firm, opened the locket and presented the codicil. The lawyers confirmed its authenticity and its legal power. The estate was untouchable. The entire premise of the marriage, the foundation of Richard's grand scheme, crumbled to dust in an instant. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Liam was utterly devastated, looking at his father as if he were a stranger. The realization that his entire relationship had been orchestrated, that his love for Clara had been used as a weapon, shattered him. He turned to Clara, his face a mask of shame and apology, but the damage was done. Clara's Aunt Eleanor dissolved into tears, exposed as a traitor to her own family. The Vanderbilt lawyers, seeing the potential for a massive lawsuit for fraud and emotional distress, immediately advised Richard to cease all action. The illusion was over. The gilded cage had been broken open, but the room was filled with the wreckage of broken trust and shattered relationships. In the months that followed, the legal battles were quiet but decisive. The marriage was annulled on grounds of fraud. To avoid public scandal, a settlement was reached, but it came at a great cost to the Vanderbilts, both financially and in reputation. Richard Vanderbilt was forced to step down from his own company, his legacy forever tainted not by a past failure, but by his own monstrous deception. But the real story is what happened after the dust settled. The journey of rebuilding was long and painful. For Clara, it was about finding her own voice, realizing that her quiet nature was not a weakness, but a strength. She took control of her family's estate, not as a silent inheritor, but as a thoughtful custodian, dedicated to preserving its true history. Liam, estranged from his father, embarked on his own journey of self-discovery. Seeking to understand who he was outside of his father's shadow, he reached out to Clara, not to rekindle a romance, but to offer a sincere, heartfelt apology. One she eventually accepted. The lesson here is profound. It's about the destructive power of lies, especially those we tell ourselves. It's a story about how trust, once broken, can leave scars that last a lifetime. But it is also a story about the enduring power of truth. The hidden gifts of this wedding weren't jewels or bonds. They were buried facts, forgotten words, and a young woman's rediscovery of her own worth. While justice was served in a legal sense, the true victory was the unmasking of a lie. From the wreckage of this meticulously planned deception, a new beginning emerged, one based not on fabricated legacies and strategic unions, but on the simple, powerful, and undeniable gift of authenticity. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories hiding just beneath the surface. We'll see you in the next one.